Redditors who have worked in a theme park, what's the biggest adult tantrum you've witnessed? I worked those not quite rigged games where you pay $2 to try to win a stuffed animal or basketball. One family was so upset over losing $10 that they threatened to wait for me at my car and knife me after work. The whole family. Most places will kick out guests for saying crap like that, considering you can justifiably call the police. When I was in high school, I was a face painter at a weekend festival involving a blue colored train who has adventures. Obviously we were just doing little trains on the kids' cheeks. However, one child threw a huge fit that he wanted his face to look just like Thomas the Tank Engine, which frankly looks really freaking creepy. However, his dad insisted and paid extra. Cue to 5 minutes after I spent 15 minutes carefully painting this kid's face to have his psychotic mom go ballistic on me that I've ruined her family's day and now her child looks like a demon. I was 16 and just sort of stared at her in shock and horror while the guy running the tent came over and escorted her out. A Jamaican dude who must have been 6 feet 10 told me he'd kill me because I wouldn't let him on the teacups. There was no room. I told him he could go on the next lot. The teacups mon was running whack-a-mole. Some guy lost and punched the winner in the throat. Called security and he was kicked out, and they gave the winner some free stuff to apologize. IDK if anything else ever happened. Disneyland. Near the bank of Main Street in autumn. Old dude looking around at the leaves on the ground muttering to himself. He spots me and eagerly heads towards me. In my head, what is this nonsense? To him, good morning sir. Is there an issue? Angrily, Walt would be spinning in his grave if he saw all this trash. I scan the ground. There is no trash, only fallen leaves. The leaves? Yes. This place has become a disgrace. I apologized, thanked him and two finger pointed to City Hall. Basically, old man yells at cloud. Worked on a ride that had a height requirement, one of only a few in the park. This ride had flight simulators that were no joke. They could go completely vertical, and if the harness didn't hold you correctly, you could have a less than ideal riding experience. There was a woman and her child who tried to come and the child was too short. We explained this. Give the kid a pass to jump to the front of the line when he's tall enough, and he's fine. Mother, however, was not. She's freaking out at us immediately. TBH, I wasn't really listening to what she said, but she wouldn't go away and was causing a huge disturbance. We call the manager on duty. She does the same thing to him. It's at this point that she says the one thing I remember. Are you telling me you care more about my child's safety than if he has a good time or not? My manager looks stunned, but responds quite calmly, yes, and, quite frankly, it concerns me that you don't. After that she left. Adults are far worse than children in amusement parks. Was working one of the kiddie rides one day, and this stupid kid in line stuck his head between the bars in the gate. It took me and two other adults to pull the bars enough for the kid to get his head back out. Afterwards, the kid's mom comes running over and starts yelling at me for letting him get his head stuck. I told her that she should have been with the kid in line. She did not like that response. She stood there yelling at me for a good 5 minutes, claiming that I'm irresponsible and should not be allowed to work the kid rides. I called a manager over on the radio and he took a formal complaint from her, writing down what she was saying in his notebook. After the lady left, he showed me his notebook, and there was a drawing of a dragon eating her and her kid. LOL, I hope you did some passive aggressive crap over the radio. Yes, lady here let her kid run off and get his head stuck. She wants to speak to you. Oh lord, where do I start? I worked at Disney several years ago. One job I had was working with the various characters, and let me tell you what, people lost their goddamn minds over the characters. I was threatened, screamed at, followed, called names, spat at, all manner of rude things for either taking the character away or not letting people cut the line. But the one that always comes to mind is one mother. We did allow Make-A-Wish kids to cut the line and meet the characters first, for obvious reasons. One time when I did this, the mother got very angry and said I wish my kids had cancer so they could cut the line. I had no response except to pray the poor Make-A-Wish family hadn't heard her. Worked Disneyland on New Year's Eve 1997. I was a busboy at Riverbell Terrace. The place was packed, not a seat to be had. There were, however, Some open seats at the Golden Horse Show, which was maybe 100 yards away. We were told to direct people over there. This woman towing 3 kids and an elderly man comes up, holds out a $20 and says find me a seat. I let her know that we can't take tips, and even if I could, there were simply no seats to be had. However, there are seats at the Golden Horse Show and I showed her where that was. She screams, oh come on, no seats. That's ridiculous. You want me to walk a mile just to sit down? I told her that I was sorry, but I would keep an eye out for seats and let her know when a table opened up. Fast forward 20 minutes. I find her and her party of basically squatted on the edge of one of the planters to eat. Whatever. I don't care. I see their trays next to them with empty plates. I ask if I can take them. Yeah, she says. Glad to see you can do something. Take it away, trash man. I smile and take them away. 5 minutes later, she's bitching to my manager that I took their trays without asking and that they were still eating. He refunded their money. I went to him after to please my case. He just laughed and said don't even sweat it. New Year's is heck. Just survive the night. It was cheaper to refund her than to have her waste more cast member time. Shake it off. It's not you who is the problem. Last night I ever worked there. Manager sounds nice enough. I worked at an amusement park last summer. I had a parent throw a basket of cheesy fries at me because his daughter wasn't tall enough to ride the ride. He said he waited in line for 45 minutes. I responded that he had 3 opportunities to check her height in the line. That was apparently not the correct answer. I would imagine it would not be unlike passing the suitcase size checker at the airline ticket counter, fighting with Sa about the size, and then being surprised when you're forced to gate check your bag. I worked in the kiddie area of one of the SeaWorld parks. There was a little coaster there called the Shamu Express, which you had to be 38 inches tall to ride. This crusty man came up with his baby, had to be like 18 months old, in a diaper wanting to ride. Went off on me when I said she couldn't. Almost comically he picked her up and held her against the 38-inch sign, feet dangling in the air, trying to make it look like this baby was as tall as a 4-year-old. He started making fun of me, read my name tag and made fun of my name as he stormed off. HAWHO names their kid Dingbrain. I worked at the guest service office in a theme park for a little while, which basically meant we either answered basic questions or had to listen to complaints. Well, this one day this couple came in with their baby in a stroller. They were complaining that our employees were not allowing them to leave their baby in stroller parking while they rode the rides. Keep in mind that wait times for some rides can be several hours and it was pretty hot that day. So we calmly described to them that it was a safety issue for their child, that someone could take their child, and that in general the stroller parking area was not monitored. We then let them know that we had a child pass system, which would allow one parent to ride, while the other waited with the child, and then allow the next parent front of line access, while the other parent waited with the child. They said that was not good enough for them as they came to the park because they wanted to ride together, and that if they were not able to ride together then they wanted a refund. So, we look up their ticket, and saw that they had been in the park for 6 hours at that point. Our answer was no. Then more back and forth about how we could not allow them to leave their child in it unattended in a stroller or give them a refund. Eventually they just left. They didn't really yell or anything, but it was just one of those moments where afterwards you sit and ask yourself if it really just happened. Former ride up here. I've had many instances of adults having meltdowns over safety procedures being an inconvenience to their best day ever experience. I've been spat on, screamed at, threatened, you know the works. I have to say over the 3 years I worked at my coaster, the worst was during the first week of my second year. So the coaster that I worked at had the tallest height requirement in the park, meaning we had a lot of families coming through with parent swap cards that let one parent wait through the line while the other waits at the exit of the ride with the kid who's not tall enough to ride. Parent 1 rides, trades spots with parent 2 who rides the next cycle when parent 1 gets back. So I had 2 mothers standing with their strollers in the exit, while dads are waiting in line. They point out their husbands, and I tell them I'll save 2 seats for them on the next train, and then ask a follow-up that's separating people into rows to hold 2 seats on the next train. So the train pulls in, and follow-up has forgotten to save 2 seats for these moms. The people sitting in the seats meant to be saved are buckled in, and I ask them if they can step back into the queue and wait for the next train, as these two moms were waiting in line in front of them at the exit. People on train start screaming at me that they've been waiting in the sun for 2 hours and they aren't getting off. Moms are standing next to me screaming that they've been waiting for longer and those are our seats, get out. I ask the people on the train again to please step back into the queue and the next train will be here in 5 minutes and attempt to explain the parent swap process again, when one of them stands up and full on slaps me in the face. She yells something about me being a 16-year-old on a power trip. I was 19 at the time. Says she doesn't want to ride the ride anyways, and stalks off down the exit, friend in tow. Mums get on the ride, we sent the cycle, and my supervisor provided a bag of ice for my face. Whoa, she could probably have been charged with assault and probably battery for that. My family and my friends visited the Grand Canyon when I was around 12. My parents stopped to use the restroom and while they were doing that we found this squirrel and started feeding it our Cheez-Its. We're doing this when a parent rushes up to us and screams at us that it is her daughter's turn to play with the squirrel. Luckily for her our parents weren't in sight. We moved to the side and this girl, who couldn't have been older than 5, sticks her open palm out and the squirrel leans in and bites one of her fingers. Mom yanks her daughter by the arm and starts to scream bloody murder trying to find her boyfriend. She doesn't find him but she finds some who works there. She proceeds to call this guy every insult in the book. Says she's gonna sue and is holding her daughter's bloody hand in the guy's face. See? Do you see this? This place is gonna be done when I'm through with you. She storms off just as our parents were making their way back to us and we tell them what happened. Back in the day, I worked at Universal Studios Hollywood for a summer as a ride operator seasonal lead on the Jurassic Park River Adventure. We had a disabled guest waiting to ride, and because we needed to add a special boat to the queue, then get the guest loaded and situated, we'd have to stop the boats from moving. Basically, we'd stop the lifts and let the boats queue up at those points until we were ready to cycle again. Some lunkheads wasn't happy about this and pulled his kid out of the boat, set him on the platform next to the boat and sent him to use the emergency phone to ask how long it was going to take. At that point, we'd been stopped about 3 minutes. If I recall correctly, I was working the master dispatch board inside the main control room when the phone rang. I remember hearing the lead who answered the phone saying, "Where are you?" Then oh crap, she hit the emergency stop. And back then, the rule was that leads stayed at the post they were at if the ride went down until the ride came back up. We evacuated the ride, then sat for 5 hours, waiting for everything to reset so that we could reopen. The idiot that caused the shutdown, escorted to the front gate. His annual pass is revoked, and a ban from the park that just might still be in effect to this day. Not related, but we used to have a ton of tourists take pictures at our entrance gate before they came on. I would drift behind the groups, pose with them without anyone but the camera person knowing, then walk away before anyone caught on. This was in the days before digital cameras, so I'm probably in hundreds of photo albums all over the world. My cousin works at an amusement park. One of the attractions is an aquatic exhibit underground that includes sharks. One part of the exhibit is a glass tunnel within a shark tank so sharks can swim on all sides of the people inside. Some Russian couple was annoyed that they could not take a picture inside the crowded tunnel without other people being in the photo, so they complained and asked my cousin to order others to make way for them to take a picture. My cousin refused as employees can't order people to move away for the sake of photo, so after a while of bickering, the Russian couple stormed up indignantly. It's shocking how some people can act so entitled. The wife wouldn't let the dad go on a roller coaster. He proceeded to have a pretty big meltdown about how he just spent several $100s on American Girl dolls. Why the heck can't he spend $5 on a roller coaster ride? TBH, I can't really fault him. I was in the guest service area and witnessed a woman screaming at the workers because she had gotten crap on by a bird. They were trying to steer her towards a gift shop where she could purchase a new shirt, which angered her even more. She really believed that the park was at fault and was yelling, "What are you going to do about this?" at these poor kids working their summer jobs. I'm glad she got crap on. They probably trained that bird to sell more shirts. I worked at a children's theme park. the kind of place you would expect 5-year-olds to be having meltdowns. Instead, the adults were some of the worst humans I've ever encountered. One particular incident sticks out most in my mind. The ride was one where children drive little cars around a track, but the kid has to be over 6 years old. My friend was loading children in, asking them their age in the way we were trained. Frequently, you get a child who is younger than 6, and you have to tell them they can't go on the ride. The children, for the most part, are fine with this. They move on. Their parents, however, are livid. So the kids are coming in, and the loader tells one he's too young for the ride. The child's dad takes this as a personal insult, and starts shouting at my friend, telling him this is absolutely unacceptable. He wants a refund. He wants to speak to a manager. What the frick do you mean my kid can't go on this ride sort of thing? The rest of us are out on the track hearing some blustering, wondering what's causing the holdup. The loader calls a manager, also security, because this guy is making threats now. Manager arrives, tells my bud to swap positions with one of us out on the track so he's no longer in the line of fire. Manager seems to be dealing with it. Ride begins. Everything's fine. Then, out of nowhere, we see this dude climbing the fence surrounding the ride, shouting that he's going to beat up the guy who wouldn't let his child on the ride. He jumps down onto the track. We emergency stop the ride, leaving loads of 6-year-olds sitting in their cars just wanting to go for a drive. Security rush out, grab the guy, and pretty much have to drag him off the track. A guy who was loading the children has to sit in the back for a while to calm down. The guy who jumped on the track ends up getting a refund for his park tickets, and the manager gives him a couple of fast track passes for other rides for the inconvenience. I told this story in another post, but a guy got PI wouldn't let his infant son down the raft ride in the water park. Fought with me. Tried to explain how dangerous it was. There was a height limit for a reason. Yada, yada. The guy just wasn't having it. Said he'd show me and went to the parking lot. I told security about it and said he's up to something. The dude comes back into the park. Security guys have him go through the metal detector and it turns out he had a gun. Cops came and arrested him. What a fuckwad. Yikes, that could have turned ugly. Glad security caught before he did anything. Whenever I worked on our most popular roller coaster, every couple of ride cycles there would be a kid crying and saying they didn't want to ride. We were not allowed to send a coaster if a kid was screaming about not wanting to ride. We would either have to talk to them and try to calm them down or just let them out and have them wait in the exit for their parents. I've witnessed countless parents try to tell me that their kid was just being a baby and to just start the coaster down the tracks anyways. Not only is it policy, but it's just a crappy thing to do to a child. This coaster was a huge wooden coaster that was pretty rough and intense in some parts, and if a kid is super scared it might even traumatize them. I've had parents tell me to shut up, not to talk to their kids, that I can't let them out of the seat. Basically they just wanted to force their crying child to endure an intense coaster when they clearly didn't want to. It was really upsetting, honestly. I had to turn away many children who were just too short for a ride, which was the main attraction of the park. So many freakouts, but safety is paramount as this thing launches you like 300 feet into the air. The worst wasn't even a freakout really. This guy was angry that his child was too small to ride, and after I told him that his child could be seriously injured if allowed on, he casually told me that it was no big deal. I can always make a new one if necessary. I have to assume he was just joking. I have to, otherwise my faith in humanity is lost. I worked back of house for years and was able to avoid the brunt of the stupid as a result. Just watched fellow employees have adult temper tantrums instead. For a few months before I did that, I worked in the parking department. People would get angry at me for not knowing where they were parked. We had multiple garages and there were signs everywhere telling you to note where you parked. Plus everyone had freaking smartphones at this point. So why wouldn't they just take a picture of the parking section sign on their way out of the parking garage? They would get really mad and threaten to get me fired. We also had a tram that some people would ride in out of the park area. One time, these kids were trying to climb on the side of it and I kept yelling at them to get down. The parents were right there ignoring it. That was the main thing I experienced. Parents were always neglectful as frick and expected us to keep their kids safe if they just ran into traffic and crap. It's like they figured that was part of the price of admission. I made minimum wage and often got no breaks because we were so understaffed from people ghosting on the job. I'd get mandatory OT on top of that. I once went 11 hours only sitting once, and it was the one time I was able to get to the bathroom to pee. I literally couldn't have given a crap if an adult was going to get hit by a car due to their own stupidity, but I wasn't going to let a little kid get hurt, so it stressed me the frick out. I was often left alone in charge of a group of 100-200 park guests. People also used to throw up on the tram sometimes. Basically anytime anything real happened, I would radio for security. Everything felt like it was above my pay grade, because things always escalated very quickly when people were drunk or high. People also used to kick or punch our performers, especially the ones in big costumes and anyone who was obviously a little person. I still get angry thinking about how they were treated by park guests. One of my co-workers who was a little person was hit in the head repeatedly more than once. Another guy got punched so hard we had to send his mask to hazmat because he was bleeding in it. My favorite story was when someone punched a girl in a mascot costume in the back of the head and she chased him to the gate out of the park in the costume. I am not an employee, but I seen this happen. I was at a local amusement park with my kids. There was a duck pond game where you pay $5, pick 2 ducks, and if either of the ducks has a star at the bottom wins a stuffed animal. Everyone else gets a little plastic piece of crap. My daughters were playing and there was another little girl playing at the same time. The little girl picked 2 ducks and neither of them had a star. The girl's dad immediately starts saying the game was rigged and there wasn't one with a star, and he demanded the poor game operator give his daughter a stuffed animal. He tried to get me to agree because my daughters didn't win either. I said actually I've seen kids win before, so it's not rigged. Then he changed his tune and gave the girl running the game another 5 and picked up all the ducks and looked at them until he found the one with a star. He cheated at a game for small children. He got his stuffed animal and left. I was amazed how petty the guy was being, but the game operator said things like that happen all the time. I worked in the parking lot and had to deal with where each car was designated to go. During the winter holidays, I was assigned to a roundabout drop-off. Due to the high traffic, part of that area was closed and a new temporary drop-off area was designated about 50 feet away in a much bigger lot where you can wait for longer without having to be sent away. My job was just to keep traffic flowing and let people know that they can't drop off or pick up in the usual area but instead drive a little bit further to the new lot. One car pulls up about halfway through my shift and ignores my hand signals to keep moving. I go to the window and let them know where they need to go. She was not having it. Dumbass. I just need to drop my kids off and I'll be on my way. Me. Sorry, but we currently can't let anyone stop here due to the high traffic and we just need you to go to this lot right here. I point in the general direction of the lot. D. I'm not going all the way back down the hill. My kids just want to go to theme park. M. I understand, mom, but I'm not sending you all the way down. You just need to pull into the lot right here. D. I told you I'm not gonna go back down the hill. Let me drop off my freaking kids and stop trying to ruin their day. At this point there's about 5 or so cars behind her that are stopped and trying to keep going through. M. Again, you don't need to go all the way down to the bottom. It's this lot that is literally just feet away. It will be maybe a minute of extra walking time. D. Frick you. You dang kids don't know how to do a fricking job right. At this point she just continued on her rant using every swear in the book. At this point I decided to just go on full cheery mode just to pee her off. M. Sorry, but there's nothing I can do. You could submit a complaint but you won't be able to stay here. D. Frick you. I'm going to talk to your manager. She then starts to get out of her car. M. Mom, if you leave your car unattended, it will be towed away. D. Frick. Theme park. I'm taking my kids to other theme park at least 2 hours away. M. Have a great day, mom. She flipped me off as she drove off. I feel so bad for the kids in that car, just listening to their mother curse and scream at some overworked teen. I worked at Busch Gardens when I was 16. They had a little Renaissance fair game area and I was a wench there. We had a game called Whack-a-Toad where a rubber toad the size of about 8 inches long and 3 inches wide was placed on a little catapult. Whack catapult with mallet. Try to get it in bucket 10 or 15 feet away. Get cheap stuffed animal if do. Well, the catapults were on swivels for aiming and this game is right at the front beside the walkway, so errant rubber frog breaches the 3-foot stick fence and slaps middle-aged mom with fanny pack right upside her head. We used to throw these things at each other for fun. It did not hurt to get pelted by one. This woman goes nuclear, starts sobbing, then screams in horror 3 times while flailing her arms, then yells, "I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it." Throws herself on the ground, sobbing in the middle of the walkway. Other passers-by barely looking down at her as they just walk to the side to get around. Her husband eventually coaxes her to her bench. Her 2 boys just stand silently and unmoving against the fence, like they know the drill. The dad stood near her for 20 minutes with a ferris look on his face, not really looking at her or responding to her, while she sobbed and yelled about how he was a failure and the boys a disappointment, and she has to do everything. She planned the whole trip and isn't having any fun. Why can't any of them help her with anything? Then out of nowhere, she suddenly stops ranting, sniffles hard, just stands up and marches up the path without a further word. The dad and sons just automatically followed after, about 5 paces behind her, not looking at each other or saying a word. Poor bastards. I was working with our favorite friendly rodent, and was directing traffic during a popular fireworks show starring our friends from a galaxy rather far away. When the park gets that packed, you need to keep aisles clear in case of emergency. Medical teams are called on the regular during the hot weather. Tourists aren't the best at staying hydrated. However, one gentleman didn't think he had to follow the rules. He planted his feet firmly in my walkway. I politely asked him to step over about 15 feet into my neatly taped fireworks viewing zones. He said no, he will be watching the fireworks from where he was. Meanwhile, his wife is begging him to move along. I was tired. It was nearing the end of my 17-hour shift. I was worn down. I took my light wand and braced myself for what I thought was the perfect petty revenge. I changed the setting on my light wand to flashing, and proceeded to stand in front of this man and wave my wand in front of his face, projecting my voice politely asking everyone in the walkway to continue on or move to a viewing zone. It only took him about 15 seconds to snap. Next thing I know, his hands are wrapped around my throat and he's choking me. I'm not really sure what happened except that all of a sudden I'm surrounded by security and he is being walked away. What followed was a lot of boring paperwork and interviews with police. He now is the proud owner of a lifetime ban from all property owned by that company. I just know that a 6-foot man choking a 5 feet 2 inches girl over a couple minutes of fireworks is to this day the biggest overreaction I've ever experienced. I worked for Disney World. Tantrums about wait lines being too long and being told they were going to tell my manager to get me fired literally happens every day to every single cast member. Worked at a trampoline park for 2 years. Had a 13-year-old kid crap his pants on the trampoline. Yes, 13. Mom calls, yells at me for letting this happen, saying I should have shown him to the restroom or some crap. I think she was just livid that her 13-year-old crap his pants, and refuses to accept any sort of responsibility for the situation. Still had to clean up crap though. Oh boy, kid was tragically, morbidly obese but just under the maximum height. The ride was a cheesy fake kiddie Ferris wheel. As an employee who had been there all summer, I knew that the motor that powered the rugged Ferris wheel was not particularly powerful. It had a tendency to occasionally get stuck if the weight wasn't balanced properly between the carts. If you had 2 bigger kids in one car, then you better have 2 bigger kids in the corresponding car across from them, or you were going to spend the whole 2 minutes praying with your fingers crossed. Mum sees me eyeballing her 200+ lb kid and knows something's up. I put the kid against the height stick and she was just a hair underneath the height where I could turn her away. But I decide to go for the "you're a little too tall to ride" approach because I had a really bad feeling about what was going to happen if she got on the ride. I was praying Mom would take the hint. Mom wasn't having any of my discreet efforts to turn her kid away. She gets pee and won't listen to a word of it. Her kid wants to ride and ride she will. How dare I try to deny her kid a ride? Her kid is going to ride. I suggest she and mom ride the big Ferris wheel instead. Mom gets even madder. Mom furiously demands her kid gets to ride on the kiddie version. Mind you, there's no weight limit posted because it wasn't usually an issue if you limited it to 2 kids per cart. The rule. I try to say kid needs to be in cart alone. Mom further flips her crap. Teenage me gives up and mom looks quite smug and proud of herself as kid and cousin get on ride. 30 seconds later the Ferris wheel is stuck, with them almost at the top. 1 minute and kids realize they are stuck and hysterics begin. Understandable. They are kids. At this point mom no longer looks so smug and I'm feeling horrible for the kids. 30 minutes later maintenance gets Ferris wheel unstuck and frees traumatized kids. Not one of the more pleasant days on that job. I worked as a supervisor at a kids ride where you go inside a haunted house and shoot ghosts. One busy day there were 2 moms in line with 1 child. I'm working the exit position so I have a better view of the line than the operator. Anyways they're getting relatively close to the front. No big deal, when all of a sudden 8 kids run up to them. A classic case of line jumping, although I've never seen it with this many people. Immediately everyone starts complaining and I tell them that they need to go line up properly. Blah blah blah. They basically ignore me. I let them know multiple times they won't be able to go on if they stay in the line. But they decided to stay in line. Their turn comes and the operator who was aware of the situation starts explaining they can't go on. They won't listen so I switch spots with the operator to deal with it. At this point they're basically yelling at me that it's okay for them to go on. I was holding the gate closed while talking to them, and the mom pushed it open and told the kids to go on then gets on herself. They sat on the ride expecting me to dispatch the unit. Had to close the ride due to guest issues. So I'm waiting for security so the mom gets off and is in my face saying mumbo jumbo, including you don't know me, if my family wasn't here. You don't know me, basically threatening me. I was pretty shocked and I've seen a lot working there but that one caught me off guard and was pretty funny. Aside from that I have plenty of other stories like a mom standing in front of the roller coaster because her kid was too short to ride so she decides it's better to protest by stopping the ride. Followed by her husband and another husband about to get in a fist fight before I came in between them. In front of all these kids. Best job I've ever had. College student got upset when I told him he was too big to ride the 25-cent helicopter outside the arcade. There wasn't much I could do to stop him since it didn't require a ticket. So being unable to fit inside the actual helicopter, he climbed on top and held onto the fake propeller. Moments later I hear an epic bang against the side of the ticket booth. The hydraulic spring thing on the bottom of the helicopter had broken, swaying him back and forth like a mechanical bull before flinging him off, right into the side of the ticket booth. A mom lost it and started screaming at a co-worker and I in a different language because her son wasn't allowed to go down the side anymore after he tried to climb up it twice. This was at the kiddie slides at a water park. Worked at an indoors theme park and there was a ride that was intended for kids between ages 2-5. It said so on the huge sign right before the ride's entrance. Yet this Chinese man made his way inside and hopped on along with the little kid. I walked up to him and told him calmly that he had to get off otherwise I wouldn't be able to start the ride since it was designed for small kids that weighed less than 30 kilograms. And he got mad and refused to. He started yelling at me in Chinese along with his wife, who was waiting outside the ride, and it got so bad that 2 of my co-workers had to come help me. He wouldn't listen to us till I said I would give him a free ticket for another ride if he got off and he literally went free alright and finally went away. IDK if this counts as a tantrum, but the most ridiculous thing to happen to me during my 7 years as a ride operator was an off-duty police officer punching me in the chest because I wouldn't allow him or his group on the ride. They had been drinking and were not being very cooperative with my instructions. I think that counts. Not an amusement park, but a small water park. I'm a lifeguard, and that day we had a kid injured his neck. He literally had to be taken out of the water on a backboard, out on a stretcher, and driven out in an ambulance. Because of this, we only had one backboard left, which means the water slides had to be shut down until the backboard was returned. This woman, who was there when the kid got taken out on the stretcher, threw a huge fit about the slides being shut down. She was yelling at the lifeguard by the slide about how ridiculous it was and that she paid to get in and should be able to use the slide. and that this was an outrage blah blah blah. Like, a kid had a neck injury and this woman is worried about slides. PSSHH, what are you talking about? Slides are way more important than some kid's neck. He probably did it on purpose to pee off that one specific woman who thinks the world revolves around her. Obligatory, not my story but a friend of mine. She worked at Disney World. This particular day she was working at the Little Mermaid ride at peak time. She was at the entrance counting the people in line as they entered and was responsible for making sure the number was just right. This one family of 5 was the cutoff to make it into the show and would have to wait for the next one. The father, there with his wife and 3 little girls, was not happy. There was nothing my friend could do about it. The theater was full. She tried to explain, but he was not having it. There was a nearby station selling waters, sodas, etc. on this very hot day. The dad left the line to go buy a ridiculously expensive bottle of water. When he returned to the front of the line he opened it, turned to my friend, read her name badge and said, "You know Ashley, it's really hot out here waiting for this show. How about I help you cool off a bit?" and proceeded to pour the entire bottle of water on my friend's head. Needless to say, they were escorted out of the line, and maybe out of the park, and never got to see the Little Mermaid show. My friend pretty much loved it because it was hot that day. She got to leave, and now she has that great, ridiculous story. I was bag checking at opening. Usually I'm grave, but today I'm working the day shift because we're so short shifted due to being bought out by Six Flags. I proceed to check a diaper bag and after giving the diapers a squeeze I can feel a can, so I start pulling out cans of bubbly wine from their babies' diapers. About 8 cans total. The mother tries to make an excuse that they forgot about them, but I'm surly that morning working a double and call her out on it. You hid them, and confiscating them or you can put them in your car. They, being the probably functional alcoholic parents they are, put them in their car but decided to make a complaint that I ruined their day with my bad attitude. The new Six Flags HR matches out of her booth at customer service to yell at me about this complaint, and the father comes through with this stupid smirk on his face and does this lurch forward and yell thing to try and startle me. So now I'm kicking his drunk butt out while this HR rep is trying to give them comp tickets so they don't rate the park 1 star on Yelp, while I'm telling her no, they are banned permanently from the park. That I've been working here far longer than she has and she is not giving them crap. All the while the drunken father is threatening to get his gun from his car and shoot me. Sweet. One I can answer, but it looks like I might be too late to the party. Worked a roller coaster. Guy dropped his wallet on the brake run just before the station. Asked us if we could go pick it up. We told him no, we can't get it after the park closes and the ride is locked out, tagged out. He threw a fit, physically pushed me aside and walked into the path of an incoming train. I had to press the stop button. He left and we called security. I had to go down and give a report since I was the assistant led on duty that day. Years ago when I worked at one of these places, I usually worked the go-karts, which we had a height requirement for. I'm not really sure why, because they limited the speed so it really wasn't even fun. But we still had to enforce the height requirement. Anyways, this kid had his birthday party here, and they were all gonna ride the go-karts. All of his friends went on first and were taller than him, and he was just like an inch too short, but I still wasn't allowed to let him ride. So I said no. The kid walked away fine. He was like whatever and went and sat down, clearly not bothered by it. It honestly was a pretty lame go-kart thing. Just a small circle, going insanely slow, but his dad was furious. I explained to him that the rules are posted at the entrance, with a measuring thing so you can see before you even get in line if you are tall enough or not. This man proceeded to scream at the top of his lungs telling me that it was this kid's birthday and he should be allowed to break the rules and ride. I just walked away and started the go-karts. The guy stood over by the gate where you let the kids and screaming at the top of his lungs for probably 10 minutes. At first I felt awful for the kid, but after his dad acted that way I had no sympathy for them. Another time, while working at this same place, I was working at one of those dumb games that are overpriced and you get the cheap stuffed animals for winning. I think this one was a basketball one. We were about to close, so there was like no one there. A couple of older guys, most likely dads who were just waiting for their kids, wanted to shoot some hoops, but didn't have any credits or whatever to play, but they still asked, because we were about to close. No one was there, and quite frankly didn't really care about my job at this point. I explained to the guys they could play for free, but if they won I wasn't going to give them a prize because they didn't pay. I don't know if this is fair. I was a stupid teenager. They agreed and I let them shoot hoops, and they walk away. Apparently they went and talked to the manager and the manager came over and yelled at me and I was just like okay bye, I'm leaving and quit right there because I thought it was kind of BS. As a character performer at Disneyland, I've witnessed too many adult tantrums to count. They are hands down worse than the kids. One story that sticks out in my mind is the day I was working near Splash Mountain in Critter Country. There was a family of 3, a mother, father, and their son, who was probably about 10-12 years old, having a very loud argument. The son wanted to ride Splash Mountain, and the parent didn't. So the father was screaming at him because the line was too long and they weren't waiting in the freaking sun all day for him to go on a goddamn ride. He was reaming this poor child until he seemed to be on the brink of tears. My attendant heard the commotion and tried to tell the father he'd need to settle down, but the parents were having none of that. The mother started shrieking and ranting about how the attendant couldn't talk to her husband that way and that he's their son. They can do what they want, ruining their vacation, etc etc. Security had to be called to talk to the parents, and only when they were threatened to be removed from the park did they actually cool their jets. I think the attendant and I both took pity on the son. He looked utterly crushed and humiliated, so my attendant knelt down and asked if he wanted to ride Splash Mountain. A big smile spread across his face and his eyes lit up. We escorted him to the front of the line. I hope the parents were just in a bad mood or something. Not that it's an excuse, but my god. I can't imagine what kind of heck that kid is living if that's a daily occurrence. That's really cool that you did that for the kid. That's what I love about Disney. I worked at an amusement park in rides for about 5 years. Every once in a while, a company would buy out the park after hours for employees and their families. One year, I was working a ride that you boarded while it was moving. Slowly, the park had been bought out by a large chain store and we were in the process of closing down to the public. Anyway, I'm loading the ride and these 3 girls around 10 years old come up the line. I board them and they are all set. Not 60 seconds later, Dad comes barreling up the line and started yelling about boarding his kids while the ride is moving. He's inches from my face screaming while I try to explain it's how the ride functions. He's not having it. I switch with a co-worker to call security and our operations office to send a supervisor, but since we're clearing out the public, it's going to take a while. In the meantime, this guy is screaming at all the employees, while continuing to let his kids stay on the ride as it cycles. I finally called security again and they and a supervisor sprint across the park. The supervisor tries to talk him down but it wasn't doing any good, so security escorted him out. Later, I was called to the security office to write a witness statement and found out the man had squared up to start a fist fight with the security full-time supervisor. He was escorted from the park and security called his company. Last I heard, the company was going to fire the guy. At my first job, about a decade ago at a theme park, for some odd reason, the last Wednesday in August turned out to be busiest day of the season, and the hottest. Lines at the pizza place where I was working were at least 30 people deep, 6 different lines, all day long, and then mid-afternoon the power went out in the whole park. It was only off for a minute, but that was enough to play havoc with the registers, and the pizza oven had to cool down completely before it could be restarted, which would take at least an hour, and people were upset. Understandable, but out of our control. There were minor tantrums, but they went away after a bit of reasonable coaxing. Once the registers were fixed, we were at least able to serve drinks, but the park was still open for another few hours, and the line started to build up again with 2 hours left until closing once the pizza oven was fixed again. At closing time, there was still a reasonable lineup, but we were able to slowly close registers until just one was left. And then I was sent out to let nobody else in line so we could close down and clean up our location. I turn away a British couple and tell them there are other locations still open elsewhere in the park. I turn away a guy, and then proceed to let a kid and his father into the line as he points to his wife who was already in line and wanted more cash. Suddenly, the British couple returns and screams in my face and accuses me of racism before I can explain what happened and says they'll get me fired. Manager sends me home because he felt bad for me being yelled at, even though at this point it was half hour extra of my shift anyways. Nothing ever happened about that so-called complaint. Last week, the ride I was working at was down for about 45 minutes due to a mechanical problem, and we had a guest in line that was irrationally angry about the downtime. He started yelling out I could build a better amusement park than this. I'm going to buy up all the farmland in the area and build my own park. Make amusement parks great again. I wish I could say he was joking, but he looked serious. Unless he's a billionaire, I don't think that park is going to get very far. Semicolon. With Blackjack and H. Ride ops here. Witnessed a grown man grab, shake, and push a girl who was about 5 feet tall and 100 pounds on a good day because his front of line return was an hour later and she wouldn't let him in. I've seen hundreds of other incidents, both to myself and others, but that was probably the worst. Worked at a Six Flags. Two very large ladies were trying to board a ride that was little more than a carnival ride with some extra lights. It was called Condor, which consisted of some cars that go up to the top of the central hub, about 50 feet in the air, then spin around. Anyway, these two very large ladies were trying to cram themselves in the same car. We were desperately trying to get them to go in separate cars, preferably on opposite sides to balance each other out. They would have none of that, and launched into this tirade long and loud about how we're discriminating against them, and they're going to sue us in the park. Freaking ridiculous. Eventually security tossed them. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.